Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we may be heading into our final 2 months of trying to save these Oakland A's. We've got a 54-50 record, and we're actually first place in the AL West here on August 1st, 2031. But after an excellent April and a good May, the team has played below average baseball in both June and July. And we're on a 1 year prove it contract at this point. My hunch is that if we don't achieve the winning record that ownership is demanding this season, we may be out of a job. Now, I think that we've done enough to improve this team and hopefully play better over these last 2 months of the season than we have over the previous 2 months. As we think about our pitching staff, we've added Trevor McGill in a trade to become our closer. And earlier in the month of July, we added left-hander Hagen Smith, although he has not been good in a very small sample size for us thus far. As far as our everyday players, added a new backup catcher who will be playing against left-handed pitching in Pablo Aliendo. We made a trade for Gavin Cross, and we brought up Hunter Goodman from AAA. And the hunch is that the hope is that those two in a platoon role will give us a more productive outfield bat than we've typically had in the corner outfield over the course of this season. And last but not least, we made a trade to bring Royce Lewis on board as a rental. He has hit very well for us in his first 16 games in an Oakland uniform with a 124 WRC plus, while we've been trying to have him learn how to play second base at the major league level. And we've decided for the time being to keep Jake Ortega, the top prospect in our organization and the number 11 prospect in baseball, down in AAA. He still has been productive there this year with a 120 WRC plus. We've had him learning how to play first base just to make him more versatile, but still view him as hopefully our center fielder of the future and certainly a corner outfielder of our future. But when we look at his ratings, I don't think he's going to be dominant at the major league level with average contact, average gap power, and slightly below average home run power in I at this point. And as much as we've had trouble with our offense, given his ratings, I don't know that he's going to be the answer. It's still very conceivable that we'll call him up in September when we get to roster expansion. But at this point, willing to see how the team plays without him over the next month as we get our first full month with some of those additions that I just mentioned to both our pitching staff as well as our lineup. And we're going to have series this month of August with all of the teams that are chasing us in the AL West, starting off with 3 games at Seattle. They are 2 games behind us right now, so we could have a nice lead on them by the time this series is over, or they could actually be ahead of us in the standings if they sweep us. We'll be playing home against Texas for 3 games in the middle of the month. Then we've got a 4-game homestand against Houston before heading out onto the road to LA at the end of August, where we'll get 3 against the Angels, and then we'll finish up with 3 at the Dodgers. So get an opportunity to play a lot of divisional games here in the month of August, and the division, with the exception of the Rangers, is pretty tight, with 4th place, the Angels, being just 5 games behind us in first. And the series with Seattle on the road was close. 2 extra inning games. All 3 games were 1-run games, but when all was said and done, we took 2 out of 3 on the road against the Mariners, so that's a pretty solid result. That puts us 3 up on the Mariners, but the Astros are still lurking just 1 game behind. And it was only a 500 week for us in the second week of August. The first full week, we split a series in San Francisco, and then somewhat disappointingly, after taking the first 2 of a 4-game homestand against Toronto, we lost the final 2 another couple one-run losses for us as we start perhaps revisiting the difficulties of a year ago. 3 games left on this homestand against the Rangers, and then we'll be headed to Tampa and San Francisco before we finally get a day off on August 20th. And with the Astros surging for the first time in a few months, we're not alone in first place in the West. We are tied with the Astros, and we're also tied with them for the final wild card spot, just 2 games ahead of Minnesota. So at 59 and 54, we're certainly still on track to get the winning record that we need, but would love to also make the playoffs this year and feel like it'll be pretty hard for Mr. Fisher to let us go if we deliver a second playoff appearance in the past 3 seasons. Colt Keith continues to have an outstanding season for us, leading the league in OPS, leading the league in ribbies, leading the league in home runs, and he's now up to 3rd in the batting race with a .310 average, only 10 points behind Joe Edwards of Kansas City, so it's not inconceivable that with a big finish to the year, Colt Keith could be pursuing a triple crown. Jackson Ferris still 2nd in the league in earned run average, 2.62 ERA. He's having a really good year for us this year, was named an all-star for the first time in his career, 11 and 4 with a 2.62 ERA, and he's already exceeded his WAR total from his first 2 seasons in Oakland, which were both also pretty good seasons. And we've split the first 2 games against Texas, but some bad news. Starting catcher Drake Baldwin going to be out for the rest of the month with an oblique strain. That's definitely going to hurt, but hopefully the new guy Aliendo on board will be able to carry the load for us, although he's hitting just a .172 in his first 29 at-bats, so he's not off to a particularly impressive start in his Oakland career. And wanting to ensure that at least we get good defense from our catcher, we are making a pretty bold promotion. Ken Weaver, a 23-year-old, we picked him up in a trade with Houston almost 2 years ago, started the year in high A ball, and he's played just 9 games in Double A. He did hit .339 in A ball and .417 in Double A, so he's been very productive in the minors this year, but we're jumping him all the way to the majors. Like his defense, and hopefully that will keep our pitching staff playing well. And the switch hitter is a little better against right-handed pitching than he is against left-handed pitching. Don't think he's quite ready to face major league pitching at this point, and perhaps he never really will be. But we are going to start him against righties and see how it goes over the month of August as we try to have a winning record here in the month of August to keep this team on track to have a winning record for the season and hopefully win the playoffs and maybe even win the division title. And unfortunately, we've lost 2 in a row to dip our record below 500 for the month at 6 and 7. And Houston continues to play very good baseball. 8 and 2 in their last 10. They've won 5 in a row. So we are now 2.5 back in the division, and we're only a game and a half up on the Twins for the wild card spot. Hopefully, one piece of good news here after missing, I think, close to a month. Thomas Sajaci ready to come off of the IL. Hopefully that will give us some more options in the infield, although we're going to have an interesting decision to make to open up a roster spot for Mr. Sajaci. And to make room on the roster for Sajaci, we ended up waiving and DFAing Hunter Goodman. Hit just a .146 with no home runs and 41 at-bats since we brought him up a few weeks ago. Also struck out 12 times, a -4 WRC plus, and he was worse than half a win below replacement in that limited playing time that he had. So is a guy who was only on the lineup to be playing against left-handed pitching. He has not been productive against left-handed pitching, and thus he's headed back to the minors, although I'm guessing he'll probably refuse the assignment to AAA in a week and likely be leaving our organization. And Cleveland actually claimed Hunter Goodman, which is fine. Means we're not going to be responsible for his contract, and we also open up a spot on the 40-man roster. More importantly than the departure of Goodman, though, is that we are definitely struggling. We ended up losing 3 out of 4 in Tampa in that series, and it's 61-59. We are only 2 games above 500 here as we head into late August. We've slipped to 3.5 behind the Astros in the division. Still a game and a half up on the Twins, as they're not playing well either, but it's getting a little too close to comfort, given that our job probably depends on having a winning record this year. And we split 2 games in San Francisco to start off the homestand. Won the first against Houston. Obviously, this is a critical 4-game homestand against the team that we are chasing in the standings. So certainly nice to get a shutout victory in game number 1 of the series. With 3 games left in the series, we're 4 games behind the Astros. So even if we sweep the series, we're not going to catch them. Still a game and a half up on Minnesota. Certainly would love to take 2 of these final 3 and win the series 3-1 against the Astros to close the gap on them a little bit. And unfortunately, we ended up splitting the 4 games at home against Houston, so a 3-3 homestand. Not horrible, but not great, and we're getting to the point where at 64-62, we kind of need great, so we're still 5 games behind the Astros, which is where we were at the start of the season. 3 at the Angels and 3 at the Dodgers before we get to September roster expansion. We are 10-12 in the month of August, so we're going to need to go 4-2 to get to 500 and 5-1 to somehow salvage a winning record for the month of August. Well, the good news as we head into the final 2 games of August is that Drake Baldwin is already ready to come off the IL, so he's going to step back into a role as our starting catcher. The bad news is we've lost 3 of the 4 games on this road trip, so our record stands flat at 500, 7.5 games out in the division with 2 games left, and we're actually now half a game behind the Twins, so we would be out of the playoffs, and we would not have a winning record if the season were to end today. Fortunately, we've still got a month of baseball ahead of us, but similar to last season, a promising start is dangerously close to coming off of the rails here for the Oakland A's in 2031. And we did thankfully win the final 2 games on the road against the Dodgers. So as we head to the month of September, still 7.5 out in the division, still a half game out in the wild card race, but we are at least 2 games over 500. But certainly, as I talked about, the trends are not good with this team. A 3rd consecutive losing month for the Oakland A's in the month of August after we got off to a really nice start. I guess the positive news is that we're getting a little better in terms of our losing records each month. I'm grasping at straws here. I know the offense still an issue. 12th in the American League in runs scored, and you can see we're in the bottom 1/3 of the league in most offensive categories, although positively we don't strike out a lot. 2nd in the American League in runs allowed. Starting pitching has been excellent with a league best 3.69 ERA, but the bullpen has been pretty mediocre, and we have walked more batters than any team in the American League, despite the overall pretty solid results from our pitching staff. And as we start thinking about which 4 players we're going to bring up for September roster expansion, as we head into the month of September, clearly the number one goal for this team is to make sure that we finish with a winning record. Secondary goal is to get this team into the playoffs, which is certainly still realistic, although with the monster month of August the Astros have had, we are 7.5 behind in the division, which is as far as any second-place team in baseball is, with the exception of the Padres, with the Rockies running away with the NL West. Colt Keith looks like he's likely to lead the league in homers, almost certainly will lead the league in ribbies. His batting average has dipped to .296, though, so the chances of a triple crown are waning. Still second in the league in OPS, and Jackson Ferris, whose record stands at 12-5 now, is still second in the American League in earned run average. And we've brought 4 players up to hopefully help ensure that we finish this year with a winning record. One pitcher, Levi Sterling, he was the third of the 3 pitchers that we took in the first 3 rounds in our first draft with this team in 2024. Took Duncan Marston 4th overall. He's still in AAA for us, was up in the majors the past couple years, but hasn't developed the way that we would have hoped. In the second round, we took Chris Livonis, who we traded away about a month and a half ago. But Levi Sterling, with that 70s stuff, may end up being the best of them all. He's going to turn 25 tomorrow, so a nice birthday present for a quarter of century for Levi Sterling to be potentially making his major league debut. Throws in the mid to high 90s. Was not great in Las Vegas this year with a 4.86 ERA. He gave up a ridiculous 40 home runs in 189 innings pitched. But there certainly are some positives. The 231 strikeouts that he put up does show that there is some talent here, and we hope that we can use him as a specialist against righties and a middle reliever, and maybe he can help improve the performance a little bit of this bullpen that has definitely been struggling here in 2031. So with Sterling being the only pitcher that we brought up, that means that we brought up 3 position players. The one that we really wish we could have brought up is unfortunately someone who's going to be out for the next 3 weeks with a sprained ankle, and that's Kevin Stubblefield. He was our 2nd round pick back in 2027, and his abilities have really improved over the last year and a half. Combined for 33 homers in 2030 with 89 ribbies between A and high A ball. Hit .272 with 25 homers and 73 ribbies in AA this year. We promoted him at the start of August to Las Vegas, where all he did was hit .400 with 5 homers and 18 ribbies and 50 at-bats before he got hurt. But this is the type of right-handed bat that our lineup could certainly use. Doesn't bring much to the table defensively. We've been playing him at left field recently in the minors just to get him a little more diverse in terms of his skills. But you look at that pitiful 25 outfield arm, and first base/DH is really the position for Stubblefield. But looks like his bat is going to be potentially good enough to justify playing one of those positions for us down the line. Just kind of a pity that we won't have him to help us as we fight for a winning record and possibly to keep our job. So the 3 players that we did bring up were Ken Weaver. We talked about him earlier. We brought him up when Baldwin went down with the injury. Weaver did well in a small sample size, hitting .318 in 22 at-bats. Gives us another good defensive catcher, lets us potentially mix and match and pinch hit more among our catchers since we've got 3 solid defensive catchers. We also brought up Hideki Etakawa back up. He had not been hitting much for us at the major league level with just a 65 WRC+. but he raked in AAA, hitting .324, 15 homers, and 145 at-bats. While he was down there, he also learned to become reasonably proficient at both third base and right field. He'll give us some more options in the infield, potential defensive substitute at second base, and he could end up starting some games for us at some point. And last but certainly not least, we are bringing Jake Ortega up for the month of September. Looking at his ratings, I don't think he's going to be a difference maker, but he does give us some speed, does give us a good defender in center field. We will play him against left-handed pitching just because Luis Lara, our starting center fielder, is fragile physically, and he's better against righties than he is against lefties. Ortega ended up playing 117 games in AAA this year, 301 average, 31 doubles, 22 homers, 17 steals, 118 WRC plus, and a 2.5 WAR. Not going to be an everyday player for us over this next month, but felt it was time to see what he could do at the major league level, and also see if maybe the excellent coaching staff that we have at the major league level helps jumpstart his development a bit, because although the season this year has been very good in AAA, his ratings really haven't progressed much at all. So as we begin this month of September, the hope is that with Weaver, Arakawa, and Ortega on the roster, we've got some good defensive substitutes, also a few more options to mix and match as far as pinch hitters. It's 67 and 65. The primary goal for this month of September is to have a winning record in September. And obviously, if we can do that, that will guarantee that we finish the season feeling a little bit better about this team. And most importantly, it'll also guarantee that we end up with a winning record for the season, which is an important goal for ownership. Luis Lara has had a solid year for us in center field, which is good. Have not done much in improving our fan interest this year, unfortunately, although attendance has been better over the summer as we've been competitive. So goal number one is to ensure that we have a winning record in the month of September. Hopefully with a winning record in the month of September will come a playoff appearance, but we have to be honest about it. Right now, if the season ended today, we'd be the first team out in the American League, half a game behind Minnesota for that final wild card spot. I don't think we're going to close a 7.5 game on the Astros, so it looks like it's primarily Minnesota and us in a race for that final wild card spot. The Angels, the Tigers, the Guardians, even the Mariners and the White Sox are kind of lurking, but seems most likely that it'll be Minnesota or Oakland as the AL wild card this year. And if we have a winning record over this month of September, I feel like we've got a pretty decent shot at grabbing that wild card and getting this team back into the playoffs. And while I think it's unlikely, as I just noted, that we're going to be able to make up 7.5 games on the Astros in the last month of the season, we do have 9 games against them. You can see that we got a 3-game finishing up a homestand, this long homestand against them next week. Then we've got 3 on the road in the middle of the month in Houston. And then we finish off the month of September in Houston as well before 4 games against Texas in a long Texas road trip to finish off this season. So with games also against the Rangers and the Angels, plenty of divisional action, but those games against Houston will be most important. Don't think we're going to catch them, as I noted, but if we want to have a winning record, it's going to be important to do well against Houston. And if we want to sneak this team into the playoffs with a wild card, it's going to be pretty important to win a lot of those games as well. And we split our 2-game series at home to begin the month of September against the Padres. Unfortunately, Thomas Sajasi going to be out for 3 weeks with a concussion, so that's a significant loss for us. It's good that we've got Arakawa back, but Sajasi's been an important member of our team this year, although he hasn't been hitting quite as well of late, and his WRC plus has dipped to 95. Hopefully he'll have him back for that last week and a half of the season, but not optimal to be missing him down the stretch. And we're going to try to tighten up our defense with the loss of Sajase, or Sajasi. Don't know why I'm pronouncing it wrong again. We're going to put Arakawa in at second base, which will certainly tighten our defense there against right-handed pitching. And we promoted Denzel Clark, who we traded for with St. Louis. Right-handed hitter. Will draw some walks and should have some extra base hits against left-handed pitching. Also a very good defensive outfielder. So he's going to be our left fielder against left-handed pitching. And hopefully we can hold this thing together with pitching and defense. I'm not expecting the offense to magically become dynamic over this last month of the season, but hopefully the pitching and defense will be good enough to guide us to a winning record and hopefully a playoff spot. But even though we just won our next game against Detroit 8-1, behind an excellent performance by Jackson Ferris, who pushed his record to 13-5 and his ERA down to 2.74. You can see Levi Sterling, 2 2/3 innings, no hits, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. He hasn't given up a run in the majors yet, so should be feeling good about things. But unfortunately, Jackson Ferris was injured while pitching. Going to be out 2 to 3 weeks with forearm tendonitis, so that is a huge blow to this pitching staff to lose our ace basically for most of the rest of the season. Hopefully we'll have him back for a couple of starts down the stretch, but certainly once again not optimal to be losing our most effective starter when the stakes are the highest. And we're going to go to some familiar names to try to replace Jackson Ferris, although we won't be able to fully do that. But Joe Rock promoted to the rotation. He's been an all-star each of the last 2 years. 4-8 record this year, 3.95 ERA, so not quite as effective as he was a year ago. But he is a solid, respectable major league left-handed pitcher, and hopefully he can do a good job for us. And then Mason Black is back, a guy who has started for us, was our stopper a couple years ago, suffered a real significant injury that was going to keep him out most of this year, late last season. We ended up signing him to a minor league contract. You can see he's recently gotten healthy, combined for 7 games between AA and AAA. Has not done particularly well in those games, but he is a proven guy, and hopefully in a long relief role, he can help us out in these final few weeks of the season. So despite the injuries, a little bit of breathing room as we did take the 3-game series at home against Detroit, 3 big games against Houston coming up, and then 2 on the road against the Angels over the next week. Still very unlikely to compete in the division, 7 games behind the Astros, but we're now a game and a half up on the Twins for that final wild card spot, and we are 5 games over 500 and only 11 wins away from at least clinching a winning season this year. Interestingly, Jackson Ferris may end up winning the ERA title. Actually, he won't end up winning the ERA title. I was going to say he may end up winning the ERA title by virtue of his injury, as he's leading the league with the 2.74 right now. But only has 161 innings pitched, so we're going to need him to come back and likely pitch well in a final start or two to get the innings he needs and keep his ERA better than the likes of Danny Nutter and Steve Tudor. Cole Keith still leading the league in homers and ribbies here. The batting average of 297, though, is almost 20 points behind Joe Edwards for the batting title and a potential triple crown. And it actually ended up being a solid week for our A's. We took 2 out of 3 to finish up a 5-1 final 6 games of that homestand. And then we took 2 out of 3 in Los Angeles. So continuing the road trip, we'll be at Houston and at Colorado for the rest of this week before coming home for the final homestand of the regular season. We've closed the gap on Houston to 5 games, so still unlikely that we're going to get them in the division, but feeling better about things with an 8-2 record in our last 10. We're up 2.5 on Minnesota, and we are now 7 wins away from clinching the winning record that we think will be pivotal to hopefully clinching another contract to remain general manager of the A's. Unfortunately, we've had an absolutely devastating week here in Oakland. We lost 3 games in Houston in the first game of the series with Colorado to drop 5 in a row. We did salvage the final 2 on the road in Colorado, but as we sit here on September 22nd, we are 6.5 back in the division. We are 3 up on the Guardians and 4.5 up on the flailing Twins for the wild card. So I said I thought it would be us in Minnesota in the battle, but with Minnesota having 7 losses in a row and the Guardians with 8 wins in a row, that has changed the dynamic there. Unfortunately, other than the 2-4 record, the real devastating part of this is that we just lost Colt Keith for the rest of the season with a fractured thumb. So the dream of a triple crown is over. That's been kind of over anyways. He's already not leading the league in homers either with 128 ribbies. He's up 14 on Wyatt Langford, so it's not inconceivable he'll still end up leading the league in runs batted in. But as we are fighting here for a winning record and fighting here for a potential playoff spot, losing by far our best offensive player on a team that struggles offensively is a huge blow to our hopes here with a couple weeks left in this regular season. And with Colt Keith's injury, fortunately Jackson Ferris is ready to come back, so we'll see if he can hold on to the league lead in ERA and perhaps make a case for some Cy Young Award votes in his final few starts of the year. We still have Sajasi coming back in just a couple of days, so we'll have another roster to move to make shortly, and we'll see if we can hold this thing together. 5 wins away from ensuring that we'll have a winning record on the season. And our magic number for a wild card spot is 11 right now with 13 games left. 3 at home against Boston, 3 at home against Texas, and then we're on the road at the end of the month for 3 in Houston, and then starting off the month of October with the final 4 games of the season at the Rangers. And we split the first 2 games against Boston, so 78 and 73. Still 4 games away from potentially clinching a winning record, and we're 3 up on the Guardians, 4 up on the Twins. So we have cut our magic number down to 9 with 11 games to go this season. And unfortunately, we lost the final game against Boston to drop that series 2 out of 3. And Gavin Cross is out for the year now with a strained back. A guy we picked up with the White Sox was not incredibly productive for us. The outfield platoon that we tried to put together with him and Hunter Goodman was not incredibly successful. Hit .212 with 4 homers and 15 ribbies in 104 at-bats. At the very least, it'll probably open up some more consistent playing time for Jake Ortega. Maybe get him into the lineup against right-handed pitchers as well, although Ortega not off to a rousing start. 6 behind in the division, and we're only 2 up on the Guardians now. Our magic number is still 9 with 10 games to go. I mentioned Jake Ortega, and his introduction to the major leagues. And he's hitting just a .167 in his first 24 at-bats. But as I said, perhaps now with the injury, we'll get him a little more consistent playing time over these final 10 days as we try to hold on to a winning record and hold on to a wild card spot here in 2031. And as we get ready for the final 3 home games of the regular season, still holding out hope that we may make it into the wild card series, but we'd likely and almost certainly be on the road in a wild card series, but holding out hope that maybe we win that wild card series and make it to a division series where we'd have more home games. Luis Lara is just emblematic of what this team is doing. He's had the best year of his career, probably. 282 average, 12 home runs, 26 steals, 4.2 WAR on the season. Dealing with a couple of injuries right now, though, a mild groin strain that has a moderate impact on his running, as well as a sore elbow that has a moderate impact on his throwing. But we just can't afford to lose him from the lineup for these last 10 games of the year. So hopefully he can keep the groin and keep the elbow together and still play competently for us, because we've got a ways to go to clinch the winning record and clinch the potential playoff spot. And we can exhale just a bit as we did take the 3-game series against Texas in, again, what were the final 3 home games of the regular season. Hopefully we'll be back here in the postseason, but those are 3 big wins for us. 7 games left in the season at this point, 5.5 out in the division, so the Astros' magic number is down to 2. Fortunately, our magic number to clinch a wild card berth is down to 3. Cleveland, after being so hot, has lost a couple in a row, and both they, the Twins, and the Angels are all just below 500 at this point. So 7 games left. We need 1 win to guarantee a winning record, and we need 3 wins to guarantee a playoff spot for us. So it's certainly doable, but we haven't done it yet. As we've talked about previously, all divisional games on the road the rest of the way, with 3 at Houston and then the final 4 at the Rangers. And we did take the first 2 games against Houston, so we're actually making the division somewhat interesting, but more importantly than making the division somewhat interesting, at 83-74, we have clinched a winning season, and even more importantly than that, we have finally clinched a wild card spot. So we will be back in the playoffs for the second time in 3 years with this team. It's been quite a saga to get here. Certainly the fact that we're going to be without our best offensive player for the playoffs is not the way we wrote this up, but those things happen. At least feeling a little more confident that hopefully we'll be able to keep our job when all is said and done, as we have clinched that winning record. We've got the team back to the playoffs. Lara's had a nice year for us in center field, and fan interest is not going to be a happy number for Mr. Fisher, but with the good play of late, we're at 54, which is probably as high as we've ever been in this playthrough. And we did end up sweeping the Astros with 4 games left for us, and it looks like 3 games left for them. Their magic number is still only 2, so we need to be just about perfect, as we're 2.5 games back, but we've won 6 in a row. Our record is 84-74. The Rangers are now eliminated. They are just fighting to find out whether they or the Mariners will end up in the cellar in the American League West. So maybe the Rangers don't have too much to play for, and we can make this AL West a lot more interesting than we had anticipated just a few weeks ago. And we split the first 2 games in Texas. Unfortunately, Houston just won today, so they have clinched the division. They are 3 up on us with just 2 games to go. We've obviously clinched the wild card. The question is whether we finish with 85, 86, or 87 wins. So we've achieved our primary goal of a winning record. We've achieved our secondary key goal of getting this team to the playoffs. Colt Keith certainly not going to win a Triple Crown, and most importantly, he's not going to be available for our wild card series done for the year, although it looks extremely likely that he will end up leading the American League in ribbies with 128, an 11 ribby lead with just 2 games to go should be just about insurmountable. And unfortunately, we lost our final 2 games of the year to Texas, so 85 and 77 is the final record. We finished 4 games behind the Astros in the American League West. We are going to be playing up to 3 games in Kansas City against the Royals. The Royals, the AL Central winners at 88 and 74, so they were 3 games better than us this year. Colt Keith ends up tied for second in homers, leading the league in ribbies, and third in OPS. And unfortunately, Jackson Ferris dropped out of the ERA leaders, ended up having a fine season for us with a 2.90 ERA. Hopefully we'll see some more of him in the playoffs in our next episode, but we got the job done, given that we were leading the AL West for a very good chunk of the season. You can see from late spring through the middle of the summer, and then things definitely got away from us as the Astros really surged past us. But the team is in the playoffs. Can't ask for much more than that, given where we've come from. We'll find out at the end of the playoffs whether or not we'll be back for another season. But given that key goal, as we've talked about, was to achieve a winning record, and we've done that. And Luis Lara also did have a nice year for us in center field, and we did make a small amount of progress in fan interest, even though that was the very high goal. I would assume that we will be back, hopefully with more than a 1-year extension when we get to the off season. But between now and then, we've got the A's involved in playoff baseball for the second time in the past 3 seasons. But before we finish up the episode and before we figure out our playoff roster offline and get ready for the postseason, check in on a couple important things. Jake Ortega definitely struggled in his introduction to the majors, hit just a $155 in 58 at-bats. With the way his rankings look right now, or his ratings look right now, I think it's going to be a stretch to get him onto the 26-man roster for the playoffs. And I think it's very conceivable that he ends up starting next year in AAA as we get him a little more seasoning and also work on manipulating his service time to ensure that he's with our organization for as long as possible. Still optimistic about what he can become, as we've talked about, like the speed, like the defense. But the high end of the batting ratings, the ceilings are kind of where they were at the start of this year. It's just that he hasn't really made any progress in much of anything. So hopefully at 24 years old, his development hasn't completely slowed. We'll certainly have a spot in the development lab for him this offseason, and hopefully things will go well with that. And what would the end of the season be without a review of Hidero Endo and what he ended up doing this year for the Tigers? And was pretty much a vintage Hidero Endo season when all was said and done. Unfortunately, the second half for him was not as good as the first half. Batting average ended up dropping to a $197, led the league in strikeouts for a 4th consecutive year, although for the first time in his career he did not set an all-time major league record with strikeouts. 38 homers and 100 ribbies are the positives, but 82 WRC plus and only 1 win above replacement indicate that I'm still happy that we used him to bring Colt Keith on board, although the fact that we won't have Colt Keith for the playoffs is certainly disappointing, but we're in the playoffs. We've got a fighting chance, and at the start of this season, that's all we would have asked for. And we will find out how our Oakland Athletics do in their second trip under our leadership to the playoffs in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.